Welcome back. Namibia has an extensive community-based natural resource management program that devolves utilization rights over wildlife and plants to communal conservancies and community forests for economic benefit. The implementation and development of the ABS legislation has been a protracted process. In June 2017, the Access to Biological and Genetic Resources and Associated Traditional Knowledge Act No. 2 of 2017 was passed by Parliament. The Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism, through its Department of Environmental Affairs, seeks to create awareness of plant and animal genetics and natural products that are related to the ABS process. Now, to give us more insight on this, I'm joined by the Principal Project Coordinator at ABS Focal Point in the Department of Environmental Affairs from the Ministry of Environment, that is Kauna Schröder. Kauna, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Good evening, ma'am, and thank you.
When we refer to biological and genetic resources and associated knowledge, what exactly are we talking about?
When we refer to biological and genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge, basically, if we talk about genetic resources, we speak about all living organisms that entails plants, animals and microbes that carry genetic material that are potentially useful to humans, and these resources can be taken from the wild, it can be domesticated or cultivated, but predominantly when we speak about it in terms of the Act, we speak about resources that are basically used in relation to traditional knowledge for innovation, for practices, for technologies, and so forth. These knowledge or resources are predominantly sourced from either natural environments, which is in situ, or human-made collections, which are ex situ collections. It can be gene banks, seed banks, or microorganisms. So that is basically what we are referring to if we talk about genetic and biological resources associated with traditional knowledge. I want to emphasize on the part of traditional knowledge, because the traditional knowledge associated with the resource is mostly when we talk about if, for example, our communities have knowledge about a particular plant species, animal species, what it does. It can be used for cosmetic purposes, for pharmaceutical purposes, and so forth, which means that it is then used for that. And that is what we basically refer to if we say biological and genetic resources associated.
Thank you so much. What does the Access to Biological and Genetic Resources and Associated Knowledge Act No. 2 of 2017 entail?
The first thing that to establish what is the intent of the Act. The intent of the Act is predominantly to protect the rights of local communities, where traditional knowledge is associated to the resource. But the objective of the Act is to improve the diversity as a means of sustaining livelihoods, sustaining systems, to recognize and protect and support any rights of local communities, genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge. But the list goes on and on, but most importantly also to make sure that sustainable utilization is encouraged, and that we promote and encourage the building of national and grassroots scientific and technology in order to how best fund to use or innovations of our resources in relation to traditional knowledge.
This Act, however, Kauna, does not include the national regulation of biotrade. How much of a concern is this element, especially amongst rural communities who trade, several species in international markets as well?
I wouldn't say that the Act does not include biotrade. You are, however, correct if you indicate that we have not. Section 23 of the Act enables us the minister may develop different regulations. But if we talk about biotrade, we look directly at activities relating to commercial collection, processing and selling of products and services that derive from biodiversity, particularly when it is related to biological and genetic resources that are associated with traditional knowledge. Now, within the Act, you would see that there is exemptions in terms of what can be done and what not. And with regards to those exemptions, trade within local communities are allowed. But when it comes to the international market, then we are still looking at how best we can encourage for international trade in order to ensure that communities are know their rights and they understand how they are protected. An obvious thing for our people is that we sit with the knowledge, but we don't know how much value go into what we are trading. People are going out and they're harvesting devil's claw, for example, mangeti, zaminia, they're harvesting it, and they don't understand what the economic value of these resources are. Mm-hmm. They don't understand what the value chain and the value addition related to these resources are. They, however, give the resources freely and trade on whether it's the oil, the kernels, or whatever it is that they have produced from that, and only get a portion or a small amount of payment to it. So it's very important that our people understand with the international market how they can engage to this, and if they understand the correctness of how they can connect equitable benefit sharings related to biotrade. Of course, bioprospecting goes hand in hand with biotrade, because people can come and they would say that it is for trade purposes, but if it's not only for commodity purposes, commodity use, then if it goes into utilization and the development of a product, then our people need to understand more so when the traditional knowledge is associated with these resources. Mm-hmm. We have a number of indigenous natural products, cosmetic products, pharmaceuticals. You see devil's claw products on the market. You see Woodia. You see so many products on the markets. But the downside of it is that our communities don't benefit from it because their rights in terms of the knowledge, traditional knowledge that they have shared with us has not been taken into consideration. So biotrade is not exempted. It's just that at it in a critical manner and see how it is applicable to the Act, and then develop proper regulations for that. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Let's quickly talk about the purpose and objectives of the event that took place. What are some of the items that were deliberated on today?
For us as a ministry, as a competent national authority, we have learned and realized that this piece of legislation that we're dealing with needs a lot of sensitization, not only for the communities and the traditional authorities out there, but predominantly for the regulators. We have learned that as regulators in different ministries, line ministries, institutions and agencies, we more or less do the same thing, but we are not talking to each other. We each operate in silos. So the main objective for this meeting has been for us to look at how we can come up with a coordinated approach in order to avoid the bureaucracy that is starting to that is coming up in the system. If you, for example, look at what the Commission on National Research is doing, they're dealing with research permits. They issue research permits. However, for the ABS office or the Access and Benefit Sharing office, we issue access permits. Now, whether it's commercial or non-commercial permits that need to be issued, we give the access permits and we need to make sure that the coordination takes place. But then you get on the other hand that people would also need a harvesting permit, for example, or you would need a fishing permit for purposes, would need another permit, most probably under another ministry. You would need the phytosanitary permit or certificate. And so we just realized that as ministries, as government, as public servants, dealing with these legislations that has an impact on the Access and Benefit Sharing Act, we need to speak to each other in order to make it easier for our applicants, whether it is students, whether it is the industry, whether it is those ones that only do research for commercial and utilization or for non-commercial, so that they know that there is a coordinated and collaborative approach within the government, also the public space, where we need to provide them with information. If we each operate in silos, then obviously we may not get to give adequate service to our people out there. And that was the main purpose of this meeting. We started today and we're going to end on Friday, but our prime focus is to look at how we can integrate ABS into the existing legislations without going into the mandate of any other ministry, but just mainstreaming our activities and have sort of a one-stop user-friendly system that can help those applicants that has to go from one ministry to another just to collect permits and be compliant to the implementation of this act.
Mm-hmm. Talk to us about, how can community members at grassroots level have access to biological and genetic resources?
Community members already have the knowledge and access to biological and genetic resources. What the ABS legislation is trying to do is to make sure that the members of local communities benefit from the utilization of the associated traditional knowledge on biological and genetic resources. They just don't know how to benefit from the knowledge that they have. I normally see it if the different if we have cultural events, for example, we have people that are sharing their knowledge in terms of what are they doing with plant resources, what are they doing with leaves, what are they doing with the roots, what does it cure for health purposes, for cosmetic purposes, for whatever purpose it is, even with animals, in terms of semen, in terms of eggs and so forth. There's so much knowledge out there that our people over the years, through indigenous knowledge that has been created and practiced over the years, they already sit with this knowledge. It's not that they can access it. They already access it because they are the custodians of these natural resources. It is just for them to understand and know how they can benefit using their traditional knowledge and using knowledge that they already practiced over the years, and the only thing that we can do is to protect their rights, but they already have access. How can they benefit from this? They can benefit through job creation. They can benefit through SMEs. They can benefit through so many different levels if they just know how best to negotiate when they, for example, get approached in order to sell. Is it Nara? The Nara, is it Zaminia, is it Mangeti, is it Marula? If they understand what the people are using it for, then they'll be able to easily access and benefit from these resources.
Mm-hmm. And what sustainable approach does the ministry have in place to preserve these resources?
The third objective objective of the Convention of Biological Diversity, and the second objective anyway, does not only speak about equitable benefit sharing, but it also speaks about sustainable utilization. Now, generally the ministry has a number of strategies to preserve biodiversity, which includes preventing the cutting of trees, putting a ban on hunting of animals during certain periods, certain awareness on efficient utilization of natural resources, promoting community ownership and granting community rights to sustainable use and benefits from biodiversity, basically creating and managing protected areas, promoting and facilitating value addition of biodiversity for increased income for their livelihoods, and diversification and so forth. So there are many initiatives in the ministry, and the commonly known are the community-based natural resource management and the community forests, the conservancies that have systems in place and projects that are purposefully designed to ensure that communities conserve, that they manage, that they rely on biodiversity and derive meaningful benefits from these resources. So where the ministry will create incentives for conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity, the utilization of their resources is the key issue. So these benefits can be monetary, it can be non-monetary, but the key issue that we as a ministry also focus on is the issue of sustainable utilization, because you don't want to see that the resources are over-harvested and depleted for that matter.
Just very lastly, Kauna, talk to us about what the expected outcomes related to biological and genetic resources and associated knowledge are.
The expected outcomes related to the resources is that we must have a functional system, a functional access and benefit sharing system in place. We must have a functional system in place in order to understand what it is that we can benefit from this. We need to understand in terms of the functional ABS system how we need to implement this. We need to understand how best we can protect the rights of the communities. We need to understand first and foremost how the enactment of how effectively we can implement and effectively implement the ABS Act and its subsequent regulations. And if we know what the functional ABS system in Namibia can make, we will understand that it is significant, it contributes significantly to socioeconomic development in the country. It adds to specific national development goals. Some of these positive impacts can be secured simply by creating an enabling environment, but most of all, it can also be further enhanced through judicious investments in capacity building, research, marketing, and infrastructure. We don't realize as Namibians how much we are losing out. If we, for example, establish a research and development center in Namibia, if we invest in that, and we don't export raw materials and we process our materials locally, we will understand what the value addition is, and we will also understand how our people can benefit from that. This will culminate into job creation. It will go into local value adding and into SME development, as well as industrial development and research and development capacity and technology transfer, and also boosting of regional and international trade. So it is important for us to understand that this act is not there to make it difficult or to regulate and deny investors to come and invest or engage with our communities in terms of the knowledge they hold, but it is there to make sure that we provide a legal framework to operate in, but also to provide a platform to orient other national efforts, such as the Growth at Home strategy with the Ministry of Trade, also to look at strategies working on cosmetic industry and to streamline approaches and practices towards community benefication and conservation of our biological diversity. So that is basically what this act and its subsequent regulations would enable us to look at. And if we can work together and have this integrated approach for implementation as regulators, we will definitely be able to be responsive in a positive manner in terms of our development for our country and the protection of the rights of our local communities related to genetic resources and associated traditional knowledge.
Madam Kauna Schröder, thank you so much for your time this evening, and thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having us and granting us this opportunity to share this information. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
When we come back, it's time for some help. We'll be speaking to Dr.